Hello, Mr. Garfield. I am here to ask you a couple questions about your life, past life, and what you think you'll do in the future. Would you like to say anything before we
Yes,
start?
I want to thank you for being here. Um, as I reflect on my past life that you mentioned it, I think the information I have is very important and can contribute to young adults and help in their decision-making process. So thank you for having me.
Is when you're younger, like 20s down, did you know that you were going to the military?
I've always wanted to be in the military. It's funny. A few years ago, after I've been out the military, I was visiting my mother, and she said, "You are still military. Everything about you is military." I love the lessons I've learned in the military, and I applied them to my private life. And one of the things I've learned in the military, which I applied to my private life, which has helped me the most, is discipline. And in my opinion, that's one of the keys to success. If you're disciplined, then you will definitely succeed. The level of success depends on other criteria, but discipline is definitely at its core.
Did you want to be in a certain branch of the military?
I've always wanted to be in the Army. The reason why I like the Army, it's just when people think of the military, they thought about the Army. But as I got in, and if I meet someone who has military on their future, say I want to be in the military, I recommend the Army too, because one of the things I like about the Army, and haven't been in the other branch, is it's bigger, so therefore you have more opportunities, more jobs to select from, and you know what your job is going to be more than like before you go in. So that's something that I like.
What is your perspective on training?
In the military,
Yes.
I think the training is great. The physical training, I enjoyed that. And even today at 53, I think I'm in great physical shape, and that's a continuation of that. Being fit and being is a part of life for me now. The mental training, I think, is great because my experience in the military will be different from you or someone else, but my experience there has taught me, and the hardest thing I've done was in the military. So after doing that, everything else is gravy, right? Let me give you an example, and not to diminish anything anyone else is going through, it's just my example. So my significant other and I was speaking of the catastrophe in Florida, in Texas with the weather, and or even how the pandemic has affected our civilians, of the population. And I said to her, that's just normal life for me when I'm deployed in combat. So it has not affected me in that manner. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, but I'm just saying based on my experience in the military, it prepares you mentally for things that are not easy, based on my experience.
Before you're in the military, did anybody want you not to go to the military or try to persuade you not to go?
No, I don't remember anyone telling me not to, because I was steadfast. That's what I wanted to do. But I must add, once I got in, I was a little bit apprehensive. But as I gotten older and realized the value, the thing about being young is you don't know what you don't know, right? And I'm what we call past middle age, so I have a lot of knowledge and things to reflect on and look back on the things. But boy, if I had to do it all over again, would I go into the military? Yeah, in a heartbeat.
After the military, did you have any other jobs that you think would have been challenging in the slightest? Just had any trouble with anything?
My career path is unique because after I got out the military, let's just go back a little bit. In today's military, or when I was in for that span of time, we did a lot of combat operations in Afghanistan and in Iraq. And those skill sets allowed me to get out the military and still work for the government because there's still a demand for that. So I've always worked either in the military as a soldier, or when I transitioned to a civilian, I still worked as a government contractor supporting the U.S. military and the government in a similar capacity. But I don't wear the uniform anymore. I was a civilian.
Did you get any medals or trophies?
Several, yes.
What medals or trophies did you get?
For just about for every campaign that you do, there's a medal for that. So I got all the medals for the invasion of Iraq campaign, the different operational campaigns that we did for different combat operations. I think I have about 8 or 9 of them. It's been a while, so I don't remember all of them, all the names.
That's interesting. Did you have a plan for if you weren't going to get into the military?
Well, yes. It's not a plan for whatever if I was not going to get into the military, because the military was, for me, I didn't stay in and did a career and retire from there. So it was always a part of life, and to dream big is what it's about. So if I wasn't in the military, I'm certain I would be as successful as I am today, and I do consider myself successful. It just would have been in a different way or a different avenue. But the military was just a vehicle. Whether I used that vehicle or another, I would have gotten to the destination.
Do people view you differently from from after you got out of the military to before you were in the military?
I think I view myself differently mostly. And then sometimes, well, it's a little bit personal, but I am a disabled vet, so therefore my plates that I drive say disabled veterans. And just a few days ago, a gentleman came and said to me, "Thank you for your service." As a human being, my greatest accomplishment, in my opinion, and I've had a lot, was serving in the military. To me, is second to none. The values that I've learned there has molded and shaped the person that I am. The experience that I've learned in there, not just from a U.S. being an American, but the places that you go and to meet and to see how other people live and what's important to them. For me, at least, it had a pretty tremendous impact on my social being as a person, the way I see myself, my value to the world, and it allows me to just say, hey, as Garfield Delamothe, that's who I am, but I should be more than that to people, right? We all have a responsibility, and it's after you take care of yourself, because you must take care of yourself, then you have to step out of yourself. And I hope you understand what I mean. And if it doesn't, it'll come to you one day. You have to step out of yourself to be better at being yourself and helping people.
For the military, did you have any other friends that wanted to go to the military because either of you or they just wanted to do it before they knew you?
And one of my good colleagues, he's one of my, I have 6 friends and he is one of them. He went into the Navy and I went into the Army. So we both kind of chose the same path. He is doing great. I think he's a battalion chief and a firefighter in the firefighting employment area, and so he has done great, a great job, and he has done well with his life, with his career. But that's the only person I knew of. There might have been 1 or 2 other people that I knew back in high school that went into the military, but it wasn't something that was discussed. It was kind of like, what are you doing next with your life? I think I'm going to join. Okay.
Did you think you were going to be going to Afghanistan when you joined the military?
Not initially, right? So just a little, let's just go back. I went in the military when I was 19, and I've always wanted to do that. I served 3 years, so I came out when I was 21, 22, 23. And then when I came out, the military gives you some benefits. I used that benefit, and I was going to college. And then I went back in as an officer. There's a different level of ranks in the military. In the Army, you have enlisted officer, and there are the warrant officers. Right, the 3, I think, is still the case. Then I got commissioned as a lieutenant. Shortly thereafter, 9/11 happened. And then I went back in to be part of that campaign because I know we were going to go to war. I know you're looking at this and like, this dude joined the army to go to war. Yes, I did. Because that's, I love this country, right? I am an American, I'm a patriot, and I think we're not perfect, but in my opinion, this is the best there is. And second, it's not even close, my opinion. Plus, I just love being in the military.
It sounds fun. Well, not fun, but enjoyable.
I think enjoyable is one way to do it, to say it. But as we sit here, understand that I have masked a lot of my experience for the purpose of the audience. Everything in the military is not great. We do go to war, and that in itself has its deficiencies, and we're not going to get into that. But at the end of the day, the lessons that I've learned there has created a better me, and that's the perspective I look at it.
Did you ever do, when you were in training, did you ever do like, team building exercises, or did you mostly do things that focused on just one person at a time?
Well, that's one of the interesting things about the military. It's all about the team, right? I go back to that experience, and I would say my most amazing moments in my life, from a self-esteem perspective, was, and I don't mean anything wrong, and please, whoever is looking at this is my experience and the way I see things, was my time when I was in combat. And I have to put that in perspective. I grew up in the Caribbean, and I grew up very poor. And if the person at 8 years old, right, in the Caribbean, saw this guy now, they wouldn't even recognize him, right? And then I would never think that I'd be this, right? And I don't say that to be boastful, but I just say that to explain why those experiences were important to me. As I said before, I was an officer in the military, so I'm a lieutenant doing my combat mission, and as that person who was in charge of men and women on the ground, and also control other assets that's made available to me to use to support the mission, and I'm not going to get into the detail of that. It gives, I'd say, me a certain sense of accomplishment, pride, and self-assurance to say, hey, this guy from there is doing this, I could do anything.
You mentioned before that you enjoyed training. What was your favorite part of training?
I enjoyed the physical part of training because the physical part of training you could control and it's competitive. We all are competitive, right? You're with fellow soldiers, and at the end of the day, you sit and you say, hey, I did this better than you and that better than you, right? But the other part of training I enjoyed is the education part of training. At any level in the military, you just learn life skills to include first aid, buddy aid, teamwork. The military is big on teamwork, and I like that. One of the things I think the military is great at is exposure, right? Because sometimes I've met people from the military. I remember way back when there's a guy, he was from Montana, and he said, man, I've never met black people before, right? And he was like, but he was with us just like, he always knew us, because at the end of the day, it's just one team, one fight. Now, that's not 100% true all the time, but that's the intent.
Do you think, before you went to the military again, do you think there's anything that could have prepared you for the military? Anything that was kind of like the military? Well, not kind of like, but could have prepared you for the military?
I don't think so. I think as you go through life, as a young person, there's a lot of uncertainties, especially as a teenager, because your knowledge base, right? Because, for example, there isn't anything you could really put in front of me now that I can't navigate, but I'm 53, right? I have had 5 decades of experience in the military, say, 5 decades of items in my rucksack, to take a military term, to navigate through that. But when you're 16, 17, 18, and in your teens, you don't really know anything. And it's true. As you get older, you look at the old self and you're like, whoa, I wasn't very smart back then, right? So you don't know what you don't know, and you just have to live life. But the most important thing, if I was to say to a young person, what is it that's important at my stage? Make good decisions. So if you don't know how do you make good decisions, all decisions you make should be within the confines of the law, right? If you do that and you remain respectful to yourself and to others, then you'll be fine. And then, of course, discipline, hard work, dedication, all those things. If you keep that as your focus, then you'll be fine.
I was wondering, do you have any medical experience? Experience?
Not in the true sense. For example, if you were choking, I'd be able to give you the Heimlich. I know how to do a tourniquet, and if I was to go back into the combat environment, one of the things that'll happen, I'll get trained up in medical, basic medical procedures to give what's called buddy aid. But the military operates as a country. That's how it operates, right? Within the military, there are expertise in every field. To include medical, dental, finance, it's all there. So when you're deployed as a unit on your mission, you have those expertise with you. Now, sometimes those expertise may not be available when you need them, and therefore, I, as your buddy, have what's called a medical bag where I could, and you have one, and I'll use yours, and you, where someone will use mine on me to give you some buddy aid, render that aid if needed.
Do you have anything to say to people around my age about, not talking about the military, but just about life? Yes,
I made a list. As I reflect on life, there are some things that I call ethos, right? I think it's a big word, but it means just things that you live by, just to make you the best person that you can. And in my teenage years, I didn't live by them as just knowingly. It was just kind of like that's how I was raised. But as I gotten older, I realized if I had taken more of a certain thing and added to my life, I would even be better at who I am than I am now. But maybe I won't because my path would have been different. Who knows? But we talked about discipline, right? It's on top of my list. A quick story. When I was in college, I had a class on Saturday morning. I was a young man. And as a young man, we party on Friday night. Well, if I partied on Friday night, I wouldn't wake up for that class. So therefore, it took discipline for me not to party, and therefore I went to school on Saturday to get a good grade in that class. In my opinion, the difference between success and failure, discipline, right? You could add every other things to that layer, and you'll be better, great, and greater at it. But if you have discipline, you're on the right track, right? I'm going to use a word here for you young people that you may not understand. Ask your parents about it. One of the most important things to you and to me as we grow old is fiscal responsibility. Do you know what that means? No. It means paying your bills on time. In America, we called it good credit, right? That's the way by which you see my voice amplify as I say that because it's very, very important. That's the way by which everyone judges you. As an adult, when you go for a job, your credit will be pulled, generally speaking. It tells people who you are. Because if you pay your bills on time, and you don't have to, it says, I have good character, and I will do that because it's the right things to do. Fiscal responsibility is very, very important. Education. If someone were to ask me, what is the factor most that make your life average to excellent, and in my opinion, I have an excellent life, I would say it's education. Education gives you several things. It doesn't just give you the opportunity to earn more money, it gives you knowledge to make better decisions. I'll say that again. It doesn't only give you the knowledge to make more money and the skill set to make more money, but it allows you to use your knowledge to make better decisions. And we could sit here for a whole day and talk about examples, but I think you guys will understand what I'm saying. Perception. Do you know what that is? Tell me.
Perception is how you look at something.
Or more importantly, how people look at you, right? We cannot ignore the climate that we live in this country right now. And I said before, this is the greatest country in the world, in my opinion. I still believe that, right? But perception is reality. My perception of you is my reality of you. And I'm not saying you need to change my perception of you, but the question I ask people all the time, are you okay with the opinion I have of you? Because none of us, you or I, lives in a world that is singular. We all interact and depend on others, right? Mm-hmm. And whether we are dealing with you to me, you with the police, you with the shopkeeper, right? The perception is very, very important. And you control that. Now, people may have their bias, but you could also change that bias with their perception of you, right? What else do I have here? Respect for women. As a man, I'm a feminist. I know people are like, what? Yes. In my worldly education, I think the world would be a much better place if women had more power and authority. And I'm not talking about America. I'm talking about globally, right? When you travel and you see how things are in the world, you realize, wow, if women were more empowered, we would be a better race of people as humans, not black or white, would be a better human race. Because women, in my opinion, comes from a place of compassion, generally speaking, and we need more of that in the world. Thank you. Pending your questions.
Do you have a position on the ratio from physical to educational value in schools?
Explain.
Like, do you think that one is more important than the other? Do you think education is more important than a physical activity? Or do you think physical activity is more important than an education?
Let me answer your question this way. To me, there is not even a comparison. And I'll give you this, right? Let's take it from an athletic perspective. If you're a football player and you aspire to be in the NFL, right? But in high school, you have, unfortunately, a catastrophic injury and you're in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. You can still go and be as great as you want to be in the wheelchair with education. You could go to school, get a master's degree, a doctorate, you could teach, right? So education to me is second to none. Physical is really important because your physical life and having physical activity is great for health. How you see yourself affects your self-esteem, in my opinion. I'm not an expert, so that's important. But whereas education and physical attributes as to where you're trying to do something professional with that physical attributes, you still must have the education. Let me add one more point to that. Even if you're a young man and you're great at what you do and you're very successful at the physical part of what you do, but you don't have the educational expertise to manage that money, I think there's a saying that a fool and his money will soon part. You will lose all that money, right? So even if you're great at physical, you still need the education to learn how to invest and be fiscally responsible. As you and I have spoken, I realized that a lot of the questions were geared towards my military service, and I would say that's about half of my life. So the question I have for you is, are you planning on joining the military?
I would join the military as a backup plan, but I am more focused on educational things and not physical things, which I'd assume the military is very physical.
I'm really happy you answered the question that way, because there is a part of the military which I did not speak about in the long conversation we've had before, and that is ROTC. If I had to go back to my young self, that's what I would have done. And ROTC means you join the military as a commissioned officer, not as an as an enlisted. And that's what I recommend for anyone who wants to go into the military. And that means you go to college as a ROTC student, so when you finish, you go into the military, something similar to that. And there are great military universities or colleges or institutions. In my next life, I would like to be a West Point officer, right? I'd love to go to West Point. And subsequently, in my life after that, I'd like to be a naval officer because I'd like to fly an F-16. So I say all that to say there are many facets towards the military, and being an enlisted soldier is just one, and it's my least recommended path, but I strongly recommend the military.
Well, those are all the questions that I have for you today.
I appreciate your time. Thank you for having me.